Hello, today I'm going over chemical reactions lecture. Now this is just introducing this idea of chemical bonds and forming and breaking bonds. But we have to start somewhere. It's going to take time to get used to all this stuff. So let's start it off. During chemical reactions, bonds break and form to change substances into different ones. So we're talking about atoms bonding with other atoms, which makes molecules, which can bond to other molecules, which makes cells, so on and so forth, going higher and higher. For example, plant cells create cellulose by linking simple sugars, while both plant and animal cells break down sugars for energy and build proteins by bonding amino acids together. So again, it's this building process. The bonds start small and we start kind of gluing together bigger and bigger molecules. These processes demonstrate how chemical reactions are fundamental to life. Obviously, we need to be able to make and destroy bonds to form new stuff, like bodies. The breakdown of the simple sugar glucose, and it gives the formula here, is a key chemical reaction that provides usable energy for cells. So in this case, they're going to break apart sugar glucose, and in that reaction, there's going to be some energy that comes from that can be used by the body. In this process, oxygen and glucose act as reactants, which are substances changed during the reaction. So the reactants are what you start with, and they're what will be changed. The reaction yields carbon dioxide, water, and energy, with carbon dioxide and water being the products, the substances created by the reaction. So we started with the reactants, and we end with the products. Okay. When reactants like oxygen and glucose undergo a chemical reaction, bonds within their molecules must first be broken. All right, so we want to break apart this glucose or oxygen, and the way we're going to do that is to break the bonds that hold them together. This requires an input of bond energy, which is the specific amount of energy needed to break a bond between two atoms. Oftentimes you'll see these graphs, and they are depicting energy either put into a system or taken out. And what we said is you need a certain amount of energy before you can break the bond. So if we see this rising energy here, if I'm down here, that's not enough energy to break the bond. Here is not enough energy to break the bond. I need to get up here to this amount of energy to then break the bonds holding the glucose together. Since different types of atoms have varying bond energies, the amount of energy required to break bonds in an oxygen molecule is different from what's needed for a glucose molecule. Okay, that's just saying obviously that each bond is going to require different amounts of energy to break it because their strength is different between atoms. All right. Once bonds in the reactants are broken, new bonds are formed to create the products, such as carbon dioxide and water. So that's what we had talked about before, right? The products are what you get after the reaction. When these new bonds form, energy is released. The amount of energy released when a bond forms is exactly equal to the amount of energy that was required to break that same bond. So we're going to see this, and this is counterintuitive, but in order to break bonds, we have to put energy in. Once we break the bonds and new bonds form, then energy is released. That's a tough one, and that's also a big misconception. So that's going to take a while to get clear in your head. Let's see. For example, the energy needed to break apart a water molecule is the same energy released when a water molecule is formed. Okay. And we can actually see this here is the amount of energy needed to break the bond is the same that will be required to then put those bonds together, making the same molecule. Many chemical reactions are reversible, meaning they can proceed in both directions, from reactants to products and from products to reactants at the same time. That's what you see here. The reaction could go this way, A plus B make C and D, or C and D make A plus D. It goes both ways, and these are the arrows that are used where the arrow goes both directions to indicate that it's reversible or going in both directions. The direction a reaction favors depends on the concentrations of the substances involved. A great example of this is how blood carries carbon dioxide. So we're going to get to this example down here, and this one's a little tough, but what happens is blood will either pick up oxygen or carbon dioxide, depending on what the concentrations of each of those gases are in the blood. So the reaction for this is going to either go one way or the other, depending on the conditions. When concentrations of carbon dioxide is high, it reacts with water to form carbonic acid. When the concentration of carbon dioxide is low, like in the lungs, the reaction reverses. The carbonic acid breaks down into carbon dioxide and water. So again, depending on the conditions, the reaction is going to go one way or the other. The system reaches a state of equilibrium when the forward and reverse reactions occur at the same rate, keeping the concentrations of reactants and products constant. And that's what you see here in this green box. Is after a certain time, the rate of reaction for either direction is going to be constant. It's going to be the same, meaning you're getting, and you're maintaining a balance between the reaction going back and forth. All right. All chemical reactions either release or absorb energy. This is because energy is both absorbed to break bonds. See, this is what I was saying, right? Energy is absorbed to break bonds. That's weird, that's counterintuitive, and sometimes we say it differently than that, but it's true. You have to put energy from the system or the environment into a molecule to break the bond. And and energy is released when new bonds form in the products. So that's weird. We're releasing energy when we make the new bonds because some energy is left over, and that's the energy that's released. Whether a reaction releases or absorbs more energy overall depends on the difference in the bond energy of the reactants and products. I think it's easier to visualize it here. So I've got reactants. It took this much energy to start to break the bonds. Once they're broken, it gives off all of this energy. So they're broken and reformed, and it gives off all of this energy here. Now, this amount is just the same amount that was put in. So we put in energy, energy comes out. That's equal. The extra is this energy right here. And that's energy that is leaving the system. The opposite is here. It takes all this energy to break the bonds. And when new bonds form, like a new product, it only takes this much energy. So it doesn't take as much energy as we input. That means we need to absorb a little bit more energy in order to finish up this process. So in this case, you have energy absorbed in order to finish that process. A reaction that releases more energy than it absorbs is called exothermic reaction. That's this one here, right? This was the extra energy at the end that is released. In exothermic reactions, the products have a lower bond energy than the reactants, and the excess energy is often released as heat or light. A great example is cellular respiration, which releases usable energy for cells and helps keep your body warm. So exothermic is giving up a little extra energy. Conversely, an endothermic reaction absorbs more energy than it releases, resulting in products that have a higher bond energy than the reactants. Photosynthesis is a good example of an endothermic reaction, as plants absorb energy from sunlight to create simple sugars. So again, that's a little bit tougher to imagine, but we put a lot of energy into it. Not as much energy goes into making the products, so this extra net energy has to go into the system in order to make those products. Okay, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please let me know.